Incredible stuff. I mean, we spoke about this a couple of weeks back, and at the time, the debt was around 1.7, billion, and suddenly we are told it's over 2.2 or 2.3 billion dollars. So it is actually growing, and we seem not to have a hold on how we reverse the situation. So I understand why there is a meeting today to try and see how that will be resolved. We need to really find a solution to this problem. And as I indicated, the entire economy and budget of Ghana becomes unsustainable if we keep piling debt in the energy sector the way we are doing. We're going to be denied all the critical investment that we should expect from government. Already, the public is just paying so much for the energy sector debt and its inefficiencies. If you look at on petroleum products alone, we have debt, levies for legacy debts. We have levies for the Delta, which is supposed to also go to pay the IPPs. We don't know where that money goes to. In advanced countries, you tax petroleum products to provide good services, rail services, bus services, so that the vulnerable in society can be protected, so that you can provide transportation to fuel the economy, because people need to move from one point to the other for the economy to run. But in our case, we pay levies, we pay taxes on petroleum products to sustain inefficiency. Even that, debt is still piling. And I think this is really a sad situation, and I hope that this meeting comes up with a solution. The promise to deliver, a plan according to the IMF program by end of June, it didn't happen. We haven't seen the ESRP phase 2, which would have laid out, a plan for us to avert the situation. So we have been delaying in planning to be able to deal with this matter. But as we have it, the debt keeps growing, and how we pay for it remains the conundrum for all of us.
Now, Ben, I recall that when the June 30 deadline was given, we were told about some meetings that government had had with the IPPs and some payments that had been made to them. We were even we had some figures and all that. I mean, 2 months ago we were talking about 1.7 billion. Today we are talking about 2.3 billion. What really is happening?
I think there wasn't much paid to the IPPs. I think there was a standing agreement, to respect the recurrent accruals and be able to defray them as they come. But the reality hasn't really lived up to the promise. And, the debt is growing. And I think that is the reality. All of us thought that ECG had some big money, they gave to the IPPs. It turns out that it wasn't money, but it was a promise. With little payments to them, and that has not been enough to actually keep the IPPs comfortable. And that is why I don't know whether they threaten again, but the Ministry of Finance saw the need to call for a meeting for them to address the issues. And I'm hoping that out of that meeting will be a plan that all of us can trust to take us out of the woods.
How does the legacy debt stand unretired when we're still collecting ESLA? There ought to have been a correlation between the ESLA proceeds and the legacy debt.
Yeah, it's also another thing. The ESLA proceeds, the original plan was for us to retire the legacy debt with the ESLA. So the banks were in charge of that arrangement. At some point, government decided that they rather want to borrow from the bond market to pay the debt owners and then move the debt to the bond market. So essentially what we did was to just, change ownership of the debt, right? And ever since, we have kept the debt sitting on the bond market to the extent that at some point, what the ESLA could only do was to pay coupons, and not actually amortize the principal. So the ESLA, as we have it, we're just paying coupons with the levies that we are collecting, and the debt sits. Before the debt restructuring, I think that the balance was over 8 billion Ghana cedis. I have to check how much that has come to after giving the haircuts, right? But still, there are debts, with ESLA PLC that we'll have to keep paying coupons on. So maybe the IMF program will be able to deal with it. I'm not sure. But without that, we will keep paying for God knows how long that ESLA levy, because it's not able to actually tackle the debt itself, but only addressing interest payments on the debt. And on top of that, more debt is being created through ECG and NETCO. And therefore, government has to intervene at all times.
Now, Dr. Kingsley Nyaku has a question for you, and then I'll continue the discussion.
So Ben, nice one. So, do you know how much we realize from ESLA yearly? That's the first question. And number two, the debt has ballooned from $1.7 billion to $2.3 billion. What has occasioned that?
The ESLA numbers, I will have to check. I mean, this year I haven't done anything ESLA. But the last count, the collection was about 2.5 billion Ghana cedis a year. So I would imagine that that would increase because consumption increases. And once consumption increases and the levy is on a litter, you would expect more revenue to come to the ESLA. The accumulation essentially is the inability of ECG to collect revenues or bill the entire power consumed and be able to pay the IPP. So, for example, if you buy power for $1 million and already your inefficiencies, that is your commercial and technical loss, is about 30%. What it means is that you can only account for 700,000 of the 1 million power that you bought. And then on top of that also, the people that you bill, your ability to collect the revenues from them also determines how much revenue in reality you would get. And that also, ECG was doing about 70, 80% of that. So that translates cumulatively to about 50% of the revenue requirement. So that means that there is a significant shortfall that has to be paid for by usually government that guarantees the IPPs and the participation in the industry. So that has really been the trend, and we have seen that trend even weakens over the period with the data that we have seen. I haven't seen recent data on the cash waterfall mechanism, but what we saw for March and April, we could only do 11.2% of the revenue requirements to the value chain. So that means that close to 89% of the revenue requirement is outstanding. Essentially, the revenue requirement for that period was about 3.8 billion. We could only pay about 430 million Ghana cedis. So that is how significant the shortfall is and the gap is. So if IPPs are talking about 2.2 billion, we are not even talking about gas yet. The power is also generated using gas, and the gas has been consumed for power generation, but we're still not able to pay for it. And my last check was that we had an outstanding debt of close to $600 million also sitting and waiting for government to pay. You might have seen recently WACO also threatening to shut down. In fact, they did shut down their valves to GNPC because the reverse flow that they were doing, GNPC was not paying for it, and therefore they had to shut down. There are still outstanding conversations on the payment because some of the promises are not delivered in there. I understand this week GNPC had to step in to say that even if ECG is not bringing money. They want to pay WACO some money to be able to keep the gas flowing from the west to the east. One thing to note even is that whilst we are struggling to address these challenges, more challenges are coming on board, because over the period, we've had free gas from the Jubilee field. So even if the power sector did not pay for it, which for me is unfortunate, because that's an economic value that we have lost to inefficiencies and people stealing power. We've lost all that revenue, 200 given to us free by the Jubilee partners. We fled some of them. We have abused some of them in the power sector. And now that has run out. So going forward, we have to pay for that gas. And I understand that last week they negotiated a gas price of $2.9 per MMBTU to be paid to Jubilee, right, the partners. So that brings it to close to $7 to $9 million a month, a bill that will also come to add to the problems that we have at this point. So you think through all of this on a daily basis, and you have to ask yourself deeply, how do we get out of this?
Right. Okay. Some George also has a question.
Yeah. Ben, morning. I just wanted to find out from you, would our situation have been better if the $1 billion that was part of the 3 billion euro bond taking in 2019 that Parliament approved to offset energy sector levies, if that had been utilized judiciously in paying off some of this debt, we would be in a better position today?
I think so. I think what government was trying to do with that was to use the 1 billion to buy some of the assets. So you have IPPs that have what we call put call option. So each party can withdraw and the other pays for the investment. So government essentially was trying to buy back some of the IPPs. So even if you decide to shelve the plant for future use or discount, the amortization cost, then you make savings by doing so. So that was the route that government chose. And we even thought that was late in the day. We could have done that way earlier when we had those agreements. Even when the construction had begun, you could have halted some of the construction, pay them, even if you had to pay $50 million. It made sense than waiting for 300, 400 million, debt to crystallize a year. But that was still a good attempt to just refinance essentially some of the project and then decide what you do with it. So they were using GIF as a vehicle to do that. So GIF was going to buy into some of the power plants like Early Power and I think Send Power, just to buy them and pay the banks so that you then control when you use a plant and what you pay for at any particular time. But sadly, that didn't happen. And we still don't know where the money is.
Ben, are you suggesting that the 1 billion was not utilized for this purpose?
No, it wasn't. I thought they used it to even pay the IPPs when government was paying. But recently, I think I heard one minister was on your show or somewhere say that Bank of Ghana swept it. So we don't know. I don't know where that 1 billion is. It wasn't used. So all the renegotiations that we talked about in the past, that was what it was to achieve. So you are renegotiating, and then you refinance the power plants, so you have control over them, and then decide so that this IPP payments would have reduced if we own the plants or GIF has significant interest in those projects. Then we could decide how we amortize that investment going forward. But it didn't happen.
Look, Ben, the reality is that we are beyond broke. We can't pay. We owe almost everybody and every sector. The last time I was reading those who sew sports jerseys and uniforms complaining. Those who supply foodstuffs are complaining. Those who cook the food are complaining. We owe pensioners. We owe people who are in active service. The middle class is virtually being wiped off with DDEP. There are negotiations with the pension funds, even over monies of those who are in employment today. the reality cocoa bills, those who just bought February and were expecting maturity in August at 32 point something, they've been told that it will be spread up to 2028. You can only get 5% this year. We owe just everybody. We are just broke. The reality is that we won't be able to pay. And it is therefore not surprising that the promises that were made on the basis of the June 30 deadline have not been met. Realistically, how do we get out of this hole?
I don't even know from where I sit. But we all have to engage. We need to see the true picture. I mean, where we sit, we don't have the full picture. We see the danger, but we need to have the full picture. And that's why we keep saying that let's have a conversation on the challenges of our country. Let people contribute to it. I mean, so that all of us can share ideas on how we get out of this. Not for finance ministry or a government to keep churning out directives, instructions, policy actions that keeps failing over time. The more we discuss and think through the issues, the right solution would emerge. And I think at this point, we cannot assume that one person has the solution to fix our problem. But our ability to be genuine on the conversation and seek, input from everybody else and let the data speak, put out the right data so that we can actually interrogate it and look at where the problem is. And all of us, I'm sure, I mean, we are capable as Ghana, to find solution to these problems. But you don't have clear data on what is happening in the space. One morning you are told that revenue has shot up, and then you note that even payments to the value chain has declined. How inconsistent is that? We need to really speak to the right data and find solution out of this. But I think a major problem really is how we collect revenue, and we can't tarry longer. We now need to hang our boots and hand over this to the private sector. And in our last brief, we have maintained that even if we don't want foreign investors into the distribution of electricity, let's stop it. Let's stop government taking our pension funds and allow the pension funds to take over the distribution of electricity and manage it from there so that we can cut the politics that breeds the inefficiencies that have brought us where we are today. I don't know whether that will be considered, but at that critical level of the value chain, we need investment. We need to fix it like yesterday.
Ben, you've made this point in our previous discussions that because of potential losses, the IPPs prefer to continue to produce and to be owed than to shut down. It appears that we're riding our luck on this. How far can we continue in this direction?
It shouldn't continue. You see, that is the tricky bit. Once it continues, it has wider implications for investment. Right? An investor wants to come and put in a plant in Ghana and generate whatever value or produce any commodity. And the conversation in Ghana is the stability of the grid. And, how the IPPs could cut power at any point for non-payment. And the conversation is that inefficiency is growing and that the inefficiency will find its way into the tariff. That investor cannot calibrate, his long-term revenue stream when, power costs cannot be predictable or cannot be modeled, very accurately. So that conversation has implication for investment attraction in Ghana. So we may be lucky keeping the light on, but on the wider scale, the country is losing on many fronts because there's so much uncertainty in the fuel that grows the economy, and people cannot accurately predict the tariff and whether the power will be stable in the short to medium term. And it also affects our ability to attract, cheaper power, because people talk about, take or pay. Take or pay is a function of risk. All right. The investor knows that there is a risk. There's potential that you will not be paid. So you need somebody to guarantee that you will get your money. All right. So if the risk persists and actually escalates, it will even get much more stringent to get somebody to agree to build a power plant in Ghana. So these are the risks that we are subjecting our country to. And the earlier we address that with all the energy we have, and not think that because there is gas, there is power plants, they will generate at least in the short to medium term, but it has wider implications.
Thanks, Ben, for your time as always, and I'm sure I'll get in touch with you for a more extensive discussion. But thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.